In the first instance, thank you all ever so much for joining from your respective homes. As it looks like we could be spending a little bit more time in lockdown, we are looking to bring our code audience a number of digital offerings to see us through until things start to reopen again. Today we are joined by Toby Anna and some colleagues from Kelly's Cause Foundation, a charity dedicated to securing the mental health of hospitality industry workers through mental health first aid training. Following my introduction, Toby Anna will take you through our presentation, and there will be some activities. This will probably be a good point to tell you all that a pen and paper will be required at some point. We'll then have a few minutes for some questions at the end. And if you would like to ask a question during this webinar, please just type it into the chat function and we will mediate and answer it if we have time at the end. We do have a strict 30-minute duration, so may not be able to answer all of your questions. However, we will be following up with everyone in attendance. So if you have any burning ones, we will address them a bit later on down the line. The transition to digital is quite new for all of us. So if we do have any technical difficulties, please do bear with us. But everything's gone quite smoothly so far, so all good to date. All attendees have been muted and your video has been stopped. If you could just leave those settings just to prevent disruption throughout, then that would be ace. But without further ado, thanks for joining us, Toby Anna. And I will now hand over to you, and I'll also minimize myself so you don't have to look at me.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ed. So I'm Toby Anna. I am the founder of Kelly's Cause Foundation, which is a not-for-profit charity that does mental health first aid training in hospitality. So obviously we're unable to run our usual training sessions at the moment due to the current coronavirus crisis. So we have pivoted a bit to more of an online offering to help support people's mental health during this very difficult time, because obviously it's something that everybody really needs help with. Whether you're, working as a key worker, whether you're out of a job, whether you're furloughed, anything, it's an incredibly anxiety-inducing time for everybody. So we're here to help. So what we're going to go over today is coping with stress and uncertainty during the COVID-19 pandemic. So these are just some really, really simple tips that hopefully everyone will be able to execute in their kind of daily life at the moment. And then we'll do a little activity to start with, which is just about identifying the stresses that you are facing at the moment, because something that's really important is identifying the things that are stressing us and causing us anxiety, and this little exercise will help us to look at that. Then we're going to look at tips for managing stress and some tips for coping with isolation. And then at the end, we're going to take some questions. So everybody has a stress container, and your stress container is a different size depending on your risk and protective factors. So these can be a whole host of different things: your socioeconomic status, your financial situation, your living situation, your upbringing, your genetics, a whole host of different things, your education, employment situation. All these different things impact the size of someone's container. So the idea is that we all have this container, and stress flows in and out of this container. And when our container gets really full and starts to overflow, that's when we experience problems and what we term to be emotional snapping. So this is when everything becomes a little bit too much and we can no longer cope with the stress that we're having to deal with. So the idea is that everybody on their container has a little tap. And this tap is either to let stress out if it's unblocked and running freely. So these are your really helpful coping mechanisms, like exercising, eating well, getting enough sleep, having people you can talk to, people you can turn to, all of those different kinds of things. But our tap can get blocked by unhelpful coping strategies, and then our container fills and overflows and we get that emotional snapping. So these unhelpful coping strategies can be a whole host of different things. They can be a poor diet, overeating, undereating, not exercising, excessive drinking, drug use, not sleeping, oversleeping, closing yourself off and not communicating with other people. So what I'd like you all now to do is take 3 to 4 minutes with your pen and paper to draw your little stress container and fill in the things that are causing you stress in this present time. You can think of it just of today, the last week, the last month, whatever it is, the things that are stressing you. write them down on paper. Anyone is going to be more than welcome to share some things that are in their container, but also that's completely optional. So it can be just for you. So I'm going to give you now 3 to 4 minutes to do that, and then we'll have a further little chat about our stress container. It can also be helpful to think about what your specific helpful and unhelpful coping strategies can be. So we all deal with things in different ways. So while you're thinking about what's in your stress container, perhaps take a note of the helpful coping strategies that you can use and the unhelpful coping strategies that you want to try and avoid. Okay, so I'll give you about 30 more seconds to do that. And then if anybody would like to volunteer to share anything that was in their stress container, then they can unmute themselves. Is that right, Ed? Is it easy for someone to unmute themselves?
It is indeed. It's just on the left-hand corner. There's an unmute button. Yeah, that would be fine.
Perfect. And if nobody would like to share, then maybe Ed will share his with us.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fine.
Okay, would anybody like to share what they've got in their stress container? Emma, I can see your face. Would you like to share some things that are in yours?
I've just unmuted you, Emma, as well.
Hi. Okay. Yeah, I'm happy if no one else
Excellent.
wants
Thank
to go
you.
forward. Okay, so the two biggest stresses for me, I think, are financial insecurity, being a chef and not doing a job, and separation anxiety, and the feeling that I have not being around all my friends and not seeing them and not being able to reach out and communicate physically rather than by message. So the things that I've written down that I think for financial security is be proactive, do an Excel sheet of your savings and make a list and try and do something every day, whether that's getting onto universal credits or trying to do something online that generates some money, rather than just avoiding it, because that was stressing me out more. Sleep often eludes me when I'm stressed, so I'm trying to listen to my body and sleep often, and I think drink less because that doesn't help. In terms of separation anxiety, I am the things that I'm trying to do with the tap at the bottom are reach out and message to friends, even though I don't feel like it. And when I do, be honest when communicating, and try not to, fall back on the bullshit platitudes that, you know, yeah, I'm fine, I'm okay, if you're not. So yeah, that's what I've written down.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing. So that's just a little example. I'm sure that financial stress is going to be something that's in there for everyone. Health, that kind of loss of control and uncertainty that we all have going on. So it can just be really helpful to do this maybe once a week or once a month, not even just during the times of coronavirus, but, you know, throughout your whole life, to just identify those things that are stressing you. Because sometimes you'll find by doing this exercise, things come up that you hadn't even realized were stressing you. Okay, so now we're going to move on to some tips for managing stress. So these are just 4 kind of general tips for managing stress all the time. So the first thing is to breathe. We're all breathing all the time, but we're probably not doing it very well. We're not taking deep breaths. So just a minute of deep breathing increases the oxygen to our brain, which activates the parasympathetic nervous system, and this promotes calmness. So basically, in times when we're highly anxious, as we probably all are now, is we're constantly in the fight or flight kind of mode, which is one of our nervous systems. That means that we're really stressed and anxious all the time. And it means that all of our underlying systems in our body stop working. So your digestion stops working, your body's inability, it becomes unable to do anything else. All it's focusing on is the perceived threat. So just by doing 1 minute of deep breathing, we can bring our body out of this and into the parasympathetic nervous system, which promotes that calmness. So there's lots of things that you can use to help you. So meditation is really good for this. There's some apps that you can use: Buddhify, Headspace, Calm. You can even just Google on YouTube a short meditation, but it can honestly be as simple as just stopping, sitting down and taking deep breaths for 1 minute. Another thing that's really helpful for managing stress, which we all know, is exercise. There's a reason that we talk about exercise so much in terms of mental health, because it does actually work. Constant exercise is as effective as antidepressants in treating mild to moderate depression. So that can give you an idea of just how important it is. Obviously, we can't all go for the gyms or go to gyms or gym classes or be doing group exercise or going, you know, out for long runs or cycles as we may have been before. But there's still plenty of things that you can do at home. Again, there's a lot of really great apps for this. The Nike app is really good. They have heaps of different workouts. The 7-minute workout app is really good as well. Again, you can just YouTube them. I know Joe Wicks does his like PE class. It's aimed at kids, but it's actually really difficult. And then there's lots of Instagram live workouts such as Cycle. So I've been doing them almost every day, and you actually feel like you're in a live class because you're like watching the instructor do it. They've generally got their housemates there with them, so you really feel you're getting that sense of community as well. And you don't need any equipment or even much space to stay active. So everybody can find a way to do that. The next thing to do to manage your stress is to switch off. So the volume of media and news that we're consuming is frightening. Turn your phone off for an hour every day. It could be any time of day that works for you. It might be in the evening, making sure you put it on Do Not Disturb or turn it off when you go to sleep, so you're not waking up in the night and checking it. Dedicated time to stop working. Now that we're all working from home, it means that we're really blurring those lines between when we're working and when we're not working. Without a commute to do that, to, you know, put us in the office and make us start working, leave work, stop working, those kind of things aren't happening. So if you set yourself a time every day that you're going to switch off your laptop and stop replying to emails and messages to do with work, then that's also really important. Otherwise, we're just constantly putting stress on our brains all the time. The other thing is to take news from trusted sources and advice from government websites. There's a lot of, as we call it, fake news kind of rolling around at the moment. So rather than stressing ourselves out and making ourselves anxious by reading a whole lot of different theories of what could happen next, if we just take it day by day, and if you use the government website as your source for what is the current plan of action and what are the current restrictions that are in place, then that can help reduce some anxiety. The other thing is to talk it out. So it's so important to talk about our anxieties and our worries. And as we did in our stress container exercise, to identify those things that are stressing us, and then also those people close to us who we can talk to. So Kelly's Cause is providing a check-in chat service with our mental health first aiders. So if you or anybody you know does need somebody to talk to, you can just email chat@kellyscause.com, and we'll do the rest in pairing you up with a mental health first aider or champion who you can have a little chat to, and they're there to just listen and for you to talk to, but also to help guide you to some mental health resources if that's necessary. So some things that are a little bit more specific to coping with isolation rather than just stress in general. And the first thing is to be kind to yourself. So I read this the other day, which I thought was great, was that you're not just working from home, you're working from home during a pandemic. This is not like we've just taken our normal working lives and suddenly moved them to our living room. We're actually having to deal with all of these things that are going on, and that's affecting everyone. It's totally okay to be unproductive and anxious. Not everybody is going to be, learning a new skill or a new language or feeding their sourdough starter every day. So it's important that we don't place that unnecessary pressure on yourself. I think if you've managed to, get out of bed, have a shower, make yourself something to eat, then you're doing pretty well. Another thing that can be really helpful is maintaining routine. So some people thrive off routine and others don't. So if you're a person who doesn't thrive off routine and in your normal day-to-day life you don't find routine helpful, don't try and force yourself into a routine now. But if you are someone who finds routine helpful, maintaining just a little bit of routine in our day can help reduce the stress of uncertainty. So it can be something as simple as going to sleep and waking up at a similar time each day. And what can also be really helpful is doing one act of self-care a day. So in mental health first aid, we promote self-care a lot. We've all got all the time in the world at the moment now. So there's no reason we can't be doing half an hour, an hour every day of something that really nourishes us and looks after us. So find what that is for you. If it's, having a bath, if it's taking an hour to read a book, if it's cooking yourself something nice, if it's doing a nice, slow, stretchy yoga class, if it's going for a walk, any of those things that you're allowed to do, then make sure that you're making time for that. Another thing that can help is reframing. So our minds are incredibly powerful. So we can actually practice CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, on ourselves by reframing the common negative thoughts that we're having at this time. So while we might all be thinking, I'm stuck at home and this is horrible, I can't do the things that I want to do, a way that we can reframe this is by saying I'm safe at home rather than I'm stuck at home. So just turning those really negative thoughts that it's totally normal for us all to be having, again, it can help to write these down. So if you find that there's one particular negative thought or a few particular negative thoughts that you keep having, writing these down and finding a positive way to reframe these can be really helpful. Something else that is really good that my amazing housemate Mel has forced me into doing every day is writing 3 things that you're grateful for. So it's actually proven that by focusing on positive things and having gratitude for the things in our life, if you write down 3 things you're thankful for 28 days in a row, it actually rewires the neural pathways in your brain. So that is something that is so easy to do. It's probably a little bit more difficult to find things that we're grateful for in these times, but it can be something that's really, really small. It can be the same things every day, but the act of actually writing those down and getting pen on paper with those every day for 28 days can recreate these pathways in our brains and make us feel a lot better. Obviously, the other big one is to stay connected. So keeping in touch with your friends, your family, colleagues. It might be that we're having to find new ways to do this. I know lots of people are doing like Zoom pub quizzes, which is really nice. It's really fun. Doing virtual work drinks. So not just keeping in touch with the people that you would normally be talking to, like your close friends and family, but reaching out to other people and also making sure that you stay connected with your colleagues. Even if you're not working, for a lot of people who work in hospitality, their whole team is going to be furloughed. They're not working, but doing something where you create a space where they can talk to each other, chat to each other, do activities. I read this great thing that Honest Burger have set up this whole kind of timetable. So all of their staff, I think it's 1,300 staff that they have, are all have access to all of these different activities on this timetable, which is just keeping them all connected because, eventually this is going to be over and we're going to kind of go back to how things were in a certain kind of way. So keeping your team kind of motivated and connected is really, really important during these times. Right, does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask on what we've just gone over? if you'd like to, you can just unmute yourself. Thanks. Or you can type it in the chat.
Yeah, I was going to say thanks so much for that, Tabiana. It was really, really informative. And if you do have any questions, please just drop them into the chat function, or as you say, unmute yourselves and speak up. I can see that there's one in from Roxy.
Yeah, I can't read the chat while I'm on there.
That's
any other tips around CBT? Yes, so there's lots of online CBT things that you can do. So if you Google online CBT, some of them are free, some of them you need to pay a small amount for. You can also get some really good online counselling help with CBT. But what I will do is I'll make a note of that now, and I will put together those specific places where you can get those from, and then I'll get Ed to include it in the email that he's going to send around to everybody. Anybody else? Okay, so any thoughts on when is best to exercise during the day? Whatever works for you. I think that before, you know, whatever you would maybe doing before isolation, I find if you're going out and going for a walk or a run or a cycle, if you can kind of do it in the middle of the day, or like kind of between like 10 and 4 when there's not so many people out, because I know if I go out first thing or in the evening, there's so many people around. It can also be good to kind of do it at lunchtime to break up your day a bit. Cycle do a really good 12:30 class most days. That's what I've been doing. It's really fun, and it's just half an hour, so you can easily fit that in between, and it gives you something to break up a whole day of just sitting at your desk or a whole day of being at home. But also what works for you. If you're the kind of person who finds exercise best first thing in the morning, then do that. If you're the kind of person who prefers it in the evening, then do that. Yeah, okay, so Roxy has said finding it really hard to sleep and wake up at normal times due to less activity in the day despite exercising. Yeah, same. It's really hard. I think this is also a bit of an adrenaline hangover that we've probably all got from everything that's been going on. So when we are anxious all the time, our bodies need more sleep. So it might be that you do need to get an extra hour's sleep in than what you would have had before, even though you're not being more active. Doesn't necessarily translate that because we're not doing as much, we're not going to need as much sleep. We're actually probably going to need more because mentally we're doing a lot more. So I think just, well, one, getting to sleep is always better when you do all the things that, you know, we know we're supposed to do but find difficult to do, like not looking at our phones just before we go to sleep, you know, turning away from technology, not looking at your phone or having your laptop or anything like that in bed with you, maybe doing a sleep meditation. I find them to be quite helpful, or listening to a podcast, and doing an hour of like winding down before you go to bed. Yeah, so just those kind of things, and trying to maintain that routine. And maybe if you're finding it hard to get up in the morning, doing something nice first thing. So if it's simple as like making yourself a cup of tea or a coffee and like sitting in the garden if you have one, or in your window, I think making use of this nice weather is something that's also really, really important. Getting as much vitamin D as we can. Even if you don't have a garden, you can open your window and kind of hang out there or sit on your front step or something like that. So if you give yourself something nice to do when you first get up, that can be quite helpful. Okay, so I'm just going to have to move that so I can see. Any tips on helping to motivate and maintain positivity in a partner without sounding patronizing or condescending? That's a tough one. I guess just like we kind of, in mental health first aid, talk about a lot about how we approach somebody. So picking the right time and place to talk to them about it. And then just kind of reading the situation. If you feel like they're not going to respond well, then don't push it, just leave it and kind of come back to it. Just doing maybe like leading by example and doing things to look after yourself, and then asking them if they want to join in. So, you know, it might be exercising together, or like and anything, doing some deep breathing or meditation together, just anything that you think. So if you're kind of modeling that, then it might be easier. But it is really hard. I also would say, like, the most important thing is to just be really kind and gentle to everybody, because it's really normal to not be feeling positive and motivated during this time. Right, so Sophie says, what can you do for your friends you're worried about that are not doing these practices, even though they know they're good things to do? How can you help other than calling them? That's, I guess, kind of similar. Well, I think staying in touch is like a big one. And again, like kind of modeling what you're doing, but also, again, the thing we talk about in mental health first aid is that mental health first aid begins with you. So the most important thing we need to remember in all of this is taking care of ourselves. So make sure that you're looking after yourself and doing all of the right things, and then hopefully the people around you will kind of follow that. But if you really are concerned about them, then you can always email us at the chat at Kelly's Cause email, and we can give you some more tips and advice on that in that kind of specific situation, and help you with that a little bit more, because this is like it takes 2 days of doing a course for me to teach you how to do that.
Right. I think there's time for one more from Gabrielle.
Okay, is there anything you anticipate could be difficult for people once lockdown is over? Yes, definitely. I think it's going to be really, really hard when we flip from this to going back into work, especially for people in hospitality who have gone from, working so many long, strenuous hours to doing nothing to going back into it. We're going to be putting together some resources around that and help around that as well. But I think that that's kind of going to be when looking after people's mental health and managing stress is going to be most important. So again, just all of those same things that we've just spoken about today, keeping in place those routines and not kind of letting that good practice slip even when people do go back to work. Okay.
Fantastic.
Thank you. I think that's bang on time, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you ever so much for your time today and imparting your knowledge on all of us. It was really, really useful. As we said previously, we will be following up with everyone with details of this session particularly, and then also how to access all the services at Kelly's Cause, and how you can just ask some questions of the team there as well. But yeah, no, really, really appreciate it. Thanks ever so much for your time. And yeah, good luck to everyone, and let's stay positive.
Yeah.